Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead, where, as all of you know, we focus on three things: self-reliance, emergency preparedness, and food security. And today we're going to do something what I think is really fun. We have not focused a video for a while, especially for beginning canners. And that's what this one is. We're going to be doing beef stew today, according to the tested recipe that is published in Ball and Bernardin. Bernardin is the Ball subsidiary up in Canada. And I have the recipe for you that the link for it is on healthycanning.com, and it will be in the description of the video. I first want to tell you, especially those of you that are beginners and maybe brand new to our channel, that we have a lot of beginners on this channel, and we have what I, without hesitation, can say is the very best learning community on all of YouTube. We are indeed a community where the teacher becomes the learner and the learners become the teachers. We share expertise, and this is a very kind environment. It's very supportive. People here are here because they are wanting to learn the safe way how to do things and to preserve the safety of their families, and because they want to help each other and spread the word to others who may have some misconceptions about what canning is. Now, if you are a beginning canner, I'm going to assume a very important thing. Even beginning canners, before they ever do an actual batch, will be well prepared to do that batch by learning a few things about canning. And I want to recommend this book. This is a USDA publication, Complete Guide to Home Canning. I'm going to put the link to this in our Amazon store. I'm also going to put a link for a free download of this, so you can read it online or you can print it free. That's how important this information is. The whole first section is on an introduction to canning, and I would recommend that to everyone's reading. If you have not yet read that, please do that, because that will then prepare you to know what it is I'm going to be talking about. When I talk to beginning canners, there is an assumption of a basic understanding of what pressure canning is. So let's go forward. This is my pressure canner. It is a Presto 23 quart. There are other brands of canners that are still excellent. This one is a dial canner. So it has a dial that says exactly what the pressure is. It also has a vent right here and a dead weight. This dead weight happens to be a 15 pound per square inch, 15 psi weight. So when it starts to jiggle, I know that this should read 15 pounds, and I know that inside the pressure canner, it is 15 pounds of pressure, and that's as much as we want. If you have read the introduction, you know that the amount of pressure you need to apply to your canner varies by where you live in terms of elevation. We are at 5,000 feet, and so according to the USDA guidelines, if we have a dial canner, we should be canning at 13 psi, pounds per square inch. If you're higher than that, then it would be 15. If you're at sea level, it would be 10. And so for us here at 5,000 feet, we can outside on a propane stove. We keep ours between 13 and 15. You can go higher than your prescribed pressure, just don't go lower. If the pressure drops below what the basic pressure is for your elevation, then you need to start the processing time over again. Inside my canner, I have 2 racks, because when I can pints, I can double stack. Today, I'm going to be canning quarts, 7 quarts of stew, if our recipe is accurate, and so I'm leaving just 1 rack in. Now, we always put water in a pressure canner because we need to have steam generated. Steam has to fill this canner, and we have to get the air out and replace it with steam, and we'll do that outside when we put the canner on. We'll show you how to do that. We take it out there, and then we have this 1 gallon pitcher that we fill up a couple of times. And you need to check the instruction book for your canner. For our canner, we need to put between 2 and 3 inches in the bottom. The water does not cover the jars. It stays below the lid level of the jars, enough so that steam is produced and all of the jars will be covered with that steam. So we're going to take just a minute now and going to get the water in the canner outside and turn it on so it will be ready for us. Just the water needs to be at a simmer when we're ready to put those jars in. So we'll be back in just a moment. Now that we have the water just barely heating out there in the canner, I always check the lid every single time to be sure everything is okay. I always check the gasket to be sure that it is nice and pliable, that there's no food or dried or anything caught underneath the gasket. And I hold the vent up to the light to look to be sure that the vent is clear. Once I do that, this is ready to go on the top of the canner when we're ready to start our canning, so I can now set this aside and we'll take it outside later. I have our recipe right here. It is beef stew. It was printed from healthycanning.com. Remember, I'm giving you the link for this. Now, this is a tested recipe, meaning that if we follow the processing procedure exactly as it is outlined with the timing and the pressure, then this is a very safe way to can. Now, beef stew is one of the easiest full meals that we can do with pressure canning. The instructions have us putting the vegetables in one pot and just waiting, and then doing the meat in a separate pot and then adding them together. I am going to change that. I want to be just a little bit more efficient. Part of being an efficient canner is to have everything all ready to go before you begin. So I just wanted to show you what I've got. Over here in this pot, I have the jars keeping warm, hot actually. I'm not sterilizing them. They're just in there. That's my steam canner. I have a little bit of water in the bottom, and the heat is on very low just to keep the jars hot. We want hot jars to put our hot stew in. I have all of the ingredients organized right here. I have 4 pounds of potatoes, 2 pounds of carrots, 3 cups of celery, 3 cups of onion, and then in this little container, I have the spices. That is a teaspoon and a half of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, and a teaspoon of thyme. So I'm also dovetailing things while I'm talking to you. I'm also browning the meat. The stew meat needs to be just a little bit browned. Jim is going to show you this meat. It's ready to come out, and it's nowhere near done, but it is browned. So this is the first batch that I'm doing, and I still have about another 3 pounds to go. All right, now we mix everything together. So I just drained the potatoes. I'm putting them in. I'm a little bit worried. This holds 9 quarts, and we're doing 7 quarts of stew, so we're hopefully going to have enough room for this. Oh, it's going to be so close. Sprinkling in the seasonings and the rest of the meat. Ah, good. Now, what we do, according to the recipe, is we cover it just barely with boiling water. Let's see how close we're very close. Look there, very, very close. One of the things that is a little bit tricky when we do big meals like this and we want an even distribution of all of the foods is to make sure that we have a good mixture so that when we dip in, we're getting a little bit of everything. So that is why I am stirring this together right now. It has to come just to a boil, which means that it's getting all of the food hot, 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 hot. All right, it is up to a boil. It's creating all this foam here. So we're going to, it's enough of a boil that we can now move it off the heat. And we're just going to get this out of the way. All right, here we go, trying to get a little bit of everything in the jars. So I have the liquid just below this ridge right here, and we've checked for air bubbles. Now I'm going to wipe the rim. This is a vinegar dampened paper towel. We use vinegar anytime we are canning meats to cut the grease. And then a lid and a band. And we're going to put this on finger tight, which is just with our fingers. And we will get it over here in our tray. Sometimes air gets trapped down in the food, and we don't want that. We want all of the air to be at the top of the jar. Wiping the rim. So here are the last three, and we do have some left over. And so it's about enough for supper tonight. So I'll go ahead and finish cooking this on the top of the stove, and it'll be a great dinner for us. Now notice that how lovely the broth is. By putting the water in and bringing everything to a boil, the meat and the vegetables released some of their juices into the water, making a lovely broth. So these are the last three. Let's get them out there. So in go the last three. Jim will come over in a minute and get a picture of the inside of the canner. And you can see that the water level is about halfway up the jars. Now putting the lid on. All right, now we can see the dial. It's at 0, so I'm going to be turning this up just a little bit. So here is the emergency release button. This will blow if the pressure inside gets too much, and that prevents the canner from exploding. I've never, ever, in over 60 years of canning, have I ever had a canner explode. So the safety precautions on these canners these days are just great. So now what has to happen is you may see some steam starting to escape here. Once this gets to be a nice steady stream of steam, then we're going to time it for 10 minutes because it takes about 10 minutes for steam to replace the air. Remember early on I said we need to get rid of all of the air in the canner, and that's true, we do. We need to get that air out of there, and the way that we do that is that it is replaced by steam. Steam has the same temperature of boiling water, and when you put this whole canner under pressure, then the temperature is able to get up to 240 to 250 degrees, and it will kill any botulism spores that may be there. I don't expect that there are any, but we always can in order to do just exactly that, to ensure that if any stray botulism spores happen to be in the food, then we are completely okay, because we are following USDA guidelines, which tell us vent the canner for 10 minutes, and we've got good steam coming out right now. So 9:43, we can go ahead and put the weight over the vent and start that, building up pressure on the inside. A couple of things that we do to help prevent botulism spores from getting in our canning is that we peel the potatoes. We wash them first, we peel them, and then we wash them again, just like the instructions say. And then we do the same with the carrots. Any root vegetables need to be peeled and then double rinsed to be sure that that's just an extra precaution, washing away any of those spores. Spores don't hurt us if they get on our hands, even if we swallow them. What hurts us is the toxin that is created if the spores are allowed to come to the vegetative state inside the jars on our pantry shelves. That's why we get our canned food up to 240 degrees, and we can only do that inside a pressure canner. So you see steam is escaping right here, and that's the airlock. It will push up. We have steam escaping here. So we've got a 10-minute wait now, an 8-minute wait for this before we can put the weight on. We've had a full 10 minutes of this kind of steam coming out of the canner. Notice that the pressure inside has also started to climb, and that works out just fine. So no worries about that. So I'm now going to take the weight, carefully put it over the steam. Now we're going to hold the steam inside, and the pressure is going to build. The airlock is already up. We are at about 3 pounds pressure moving up. When we get to 13, we can start our timing. Timing for quartz is 90 minutes. That's an hour and a half. And for 90 minutes, this pressure canner needs to stay out here with the pressure at 13 psi or above, between 13 and 15. We use our ears to tell a lot. We leave the door open with the screen in place. And once we hear this jiggling just a little bit, we know it's up to 15. We may need to come and adjust the heat a little bit, but we can't ever let it get down below 13. So that's what is next. We will come back when, let me just explain what happens once it reaches the 90-minute processing time. Then we turn the heat off and we walk away from this canner. We let it come down all on its own to 0 pressure. Now right now it is 41 degrees out here, so it probably is going to come down fairly fast, and that works just great for us, as long as the pressure naturally lessens down to 0. The timer just went off, and before I turn the heat off, I want you to see this weight and how it is rocking. This is telling us that the pressure inside the canner is at 15. It just barely climbed up from 13 to 15. And you can also see on the dial that it is a little bit less than 15 on the dial. So that means my dial is just a little bit off, but since I have this sure thing, and that it's 15, I know that everything is good. So I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off. There, it just went out. And then we're just going to walk away and let this cool down. Many, many years ago, as a young canner just starting out with pressure canning, I used to pick up my canner, put it in the sink, and run cold water over the top of it. Please do not do that. Oh my gosh, I had no clue what I was doing back then, but I was disrupting the whole canning process, because these last few minutes, the pressure is still inside. Even though the heat is off, the temperature is still up, and this canner is still in the kill zone, meaning that it is hot enough to kill botulism spores. So we need to just let it stay that way, and gradually it'll move out of the kill zone and then get all the way down. The air lock will drop, the dial will come back to 0, and we'll be able to come back in probably half an hour or so. It is 54 degrees out here right now, so it's warmed up a little bit, but it will, it's cooler than my kitchen, so it will probably take about 30 minutes for this to cool all the way, and we'll be back then. It took it 45 minutes to cool down and get all the way down, plus you can see that the airlock is all the way down here, and as I remove the weight, there's no pressure escaping, and the pressure is down to 0. Now we've also given it an extra 5 minutes to just sit here, and that is for the purpose of reducing the probability of any siphoning. Siphoning is when water from the inside of the jar is drawn out into the water in the canner, and that sometimes happens no matter what you do, and I don't even worry about it. USDA says that there's nothing to worry about so long as the jars still have about 50% of the liquid left in. So I'm going to very carefully remove this lid, turning it away from my face. And here is our beautiful stew. As you can see, we still have some super boiling going on in some of these jars, and that is a very normal process as it cools down. Remember, it wasn't too long ago that those jars were up to 240 degrees under pressure, and they were boiling at that hot pressure. And so it's just natural that it's going to take them a while to cool down. So we have spread them out on this rack so there's air underneath them and between them so that they can cool down as quickly as possible naturally. So some of these jars have already popped, meaning that the lids have gone from this to this. So they're being drawn down into the jar and sealed. So let's test. Nope. Yes. 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 So this one is the only one that hasn't. So hopefully this one will seal. And so that is good news. And so they're just going to sit out here for the rest of the afternoon. Later this evening, probably by the time we go to bed, which is in about 10 hours from now, they will be cool enough that I can put them under the faucet and run some hot soapy water over them to wash them off. We'll get them outside and add them to our food storage. So let's talk about a couple of things. I'm just going to carefully slide these aside. Here is the remaining stew that we had left over. So it has now been thoroughly cooked, but it's not stew. Look at all of that runny liquid. And so what do we do once we pour the bottle of stew into a pan to heat up for dinner? Well, we'll need to thicken it. And there are several ways that we can thicken it. One of the ways that I like to thicken things like this is to use roux, R-O-U-X. We have a video on preparing roux. This is a mixture of butter and flour that has been cooked, and it is a thickener. Now, I can just dump the roux in. It's going to add a little bit of flavor of the butter, plus the flour is going to thicken it. Or I can, what I had done for years and years was take a jar of stew, open it up, and then drain the liquid out in a separate container and added flour to thicken it up. But we're just going to use a little bit of this roux, get it thick, and then I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and then I'll show it to you when it's done. So what happens if you don't like this stew recipe, if it's too bland for you? And it may be. It's a little bland for us. I made it exactly according to the tested recipe, but is it okay to doctor it up a little bit? You can do all the doctoring you want to after you get it out of the jar. But before you put it into the jar, if you want to do doctoring, I know that some of you may wonder, well, couldn't I use beef broth instead of just water? And the answer to that is yes, you could. You could do that. It makes its own broth, which is really a nice tasting broth. It's just fine. The salt is just right. The pepper is just right. We really do like the thyme. But what if I wanted to add something else besides thyme? You can adjust the flavorings and the spices, the herbs, if you wish, up to a point, no more than about a teaspoon per quart. And you could add whatever you might want in terms of spices. What you cannot do safely is to add any kind of fat or any kind of thickening agent. We do all of that after we get it out of the jar. But there is a little wiggle room on the flavoring before you can it. But what we never adjust is the processing time, because that has been very thoroughly tested with the method, and the method included us heating up the vegetables and the meat before we put it into the jars. Don't try to put them in cold or raw, because then your timing is going to be messed up. Follow the tested recipe methodology perfectly, but you can adjust the taste a little bit if you wish. More salt, less salt, seasonings, flavorings, all of that is okay, provided it is the dry herbs or powdered seasonings that you're using. So I'm going to check on our stew. So now you can take a look at this. Working with roux is such a pleasant experience. The butter melts, leaving the flour to thicken, so it gives it a little bit of a flavor, plus a nice thick gravy. So Jim and I have decided this looks so good, we're just going to have it for our lunch today. So this is what it looks like when it's dished up. And it is just delicious. I just had a bite a minute ago and it's just great. We hope that this has been very useful to you. We hope it's been a good review to those of you that already know how to can beef stew. We hope that it has been very informative for those that are beginners and who have never done beef stew before. It is one of the easiest meals that you can pressure can. It goes together quickly. The longest preparation part is peeling the potatoes, of course. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our community. We respect and appreciate our community so very much. And we will see you soon for another video.